I know it's not Memorial Day. Memorial Day is a day which sadly now stands more for the beginning of the summer vacation season. But what Memorial Day really is about is a day to remember those who have died serving this country's military. It's often confused with Veterans Day, which is next Friday. But Veterans Day celebrates all those who have served. Memorial Day is different, though, because it's specifically for those who've died in the service of this country. And one of the more moving traditions for Memorial Day is that in the morning they gather at the flagpole and they raise the flag to full staff. And then they slowly lower it to half staff. And it stays that way until noon. And at noon, they then return it to full staff. You see, the half staff position remembers the more than 1 million men and women who have given their lives in service to this country. And then at noon, when they rise up back to full staff, that's in the memory of those who died. The memory of them being raised by those of us who are still alive. And as a personal resolve, to never let their sacrifice be in vain. But instead, to rise up in their place, to continue the fight for liberty and justice for all. You see, there's one person on this planet who should enter into Memorial Day with more sobriety, more reflection than anyone else on the entire planet. Because there's only one person who ultimately decides where troops are stationed, where ships will be sent, where planes will be flown, and where weapons will be used. The one person that all the military generals and admirals take their orders from, the Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States. So it seems fitting in this election season that as we deal with this series, is it okay for a Christian to ... Weeks that we have looked at in the past. Can a Christian watch R-rated movies? Can a Christian drink alcohol? Can a Christian smoke marijuana? Can a Christian gamble? Can a Christian do yoga? It seems fitting in this season that we look at, is it okay for a Christian to vote for, really it's a blank because we can fill it in a number of different ways. You can fill it in with the party name. Is it okay for a Christian to vote for a Republican? Is it okay for a Christian to vote for a Democrat? You can fill it in with a person's name. Is it okay for a Christian to vote for Hillary Clinton? Is it okay for a Christian to vote for Donald Trump? You can ask the question a million different ways. Is it okay for a Christian to vote for someone who is not a Christian? Is it okay to vote for someone who has not embodied a Christian lifestyle? Someone who holds the policies that aren't Christian? Someone who lobbies for legislation that goes against Christian values? On and on it could go. And quite possibly never has this question been raised so much as in this current election. You see, because in this current election we have two candidates who are the two most disliked, distrusted, disapproved of candidates that we've probably ever had in a presidential election. More than half of U.S. voters view Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump unfavorably. Both are people who in one way or another have lifestyles or positions, have taken stands or cast votes that have been seen by many as diametrically opposed to the Christian faith. One has been labeled as an habitual, untrustworthy liar who will say anything to get elected, while continually embroiled in scandals, from Whitewater to Benghazi, her husband's affairs to emails, and constantly changing her hairstyle. The other has been married multiple times, makes inflammatory remarks about women, uses coarse language, delights in inciting cultural divides, and needs to change his hairstyle. Which has led more than a few people to say, I'm just not going to vote. I can't vote for either of them, so I'm not going to vote for either. So let's break down this question into two questions. First, is it okay for a Christian to vote, period, even if it might be perceived as voting for the lesser of two evils? And then second, who is it okay to vote for? So for those of you who are here for the first time this week, we've been in this series called Is It Okay for a Christian to Vote, to do this? And we've broken it down with this graph, this chart. And as Christ followers, we always start with the Bible. We look to see, is there a permission? And if there is, then yes, we can do this issue. If there's a prohibition, then no, we can't. But what we've seen in most of these issues is there's not a direct permission nor a direct prohibition. So we're left with principles. And when there's not either a yes or a no, that means that there's biblical freedom to do that issue. But it's biblical freedom guided by those biblical principles. So we get to the freedom box. But even that isn't the end of the issue. Because what you have to do then is you have to say, is it wise? For me as an individual, based on my background, based on my upbringing, based on my DNA, is it wise for me to do that? And it may be a different answer for each of us. But that doesn't even end the discussion, because we have to go to the fourth box. And we have to look at, when we look at someone else who's a non-Christian, what witness will my actions do for that non-Christian? Will they view my actions as being a disavowal of God? And then secondarily, for those who are Christians, if they have a weakness based on their background, their DNA, their upbringing, how does that affect what I do when I am around them? So that's how we've broken down this series so far. So when we look at who it's okay to vote for, is there a direct permission or prohibition in the Bible? It doesn't really talk about voting per se, but I will tell you, I think it is there. The Bible tells us what our role as citizens should be. So let's jump into this. We do have a role, and here's what Jesus talked about. Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand. And it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven." That's not about salt, and it's not about a candle. That's Jesus telling us that we need to be people of influence. Those are important metaphors in the Bible. You see, in Jesus' day, salt was one of the most important elements you could possess. It had nothing to do with making your food taste better. It was a preservative. You see, back then, they didn't have refrigerators, they didn't have freezers, and you couldn't buy veggie meat in a can. You needed salt to preserve meat. If you had a piece of meat and you weren't able to eat it right away and you didn't want it to decay pretty quickly, you took salt and you rubbed it into the meat. And it kept it from decaying quite so fastly. That salt, if rubbed in, would keep it from going bad. So when Jesus tells us that we should be like the salt to the earth, he meant that we are to live life in such a way that our very presence acted like salt. Because left to itself, this world will decay. We need to act like salt. We need to be a preservative to this world. And then Jesus called us to be the light of the world. Letting our light shine is having what Christ is doing in our lives and the truth about what Christ wants to do in everyone else's life. So let that be known. The light is the message of Christ, that he came into the world to show us the way to live and to provide the means for us to be in the right relationship with him, to be a Christ follower. So you can think of it this way. Salt has a negative influence, meaning that it works against something. It works against decay. Light is a positive influence. It's trying to bring something to the situation. And they are both needed in order to make an influence on somebody. We work against moral and cultural decay. Then we work for truth. We are to be salt and light. Actively be salt and light. It's as if Jesus was saying, you and only you can play your part in stopping the world's moral decay. You and only you can shine the light where you are. There's a salt, there's a light that only those of us who are followers of Christ can bring. Because his truth, his values, his mission is unique to all the world. And that's your job. It's my job, is to be the salt and the light. As John Stott once noted, one can hardly blame unsalted meat for going bad. It cannot do anything else. The real question is, where is the salt? You're the salt. I'm the salt. You're the light and I'm the light. But Jesus doesn't stop there. He ups the ante a little bit more. He says that if salt loses its saltiness, if it doesn't function like salt, then it's of no use. If light doesn't shine, then it makes no sense. Late historian Daniel Borston noted that millions of Americans sit in front of their TVs, passively watching what's going on. He writes, we are tempted to become spectators. We see so much every day on the screen of catastrophes that we can do nothing about. Floods, fires, terrorist attacks, kidnapping, starvation, corruption. That we make these the very prototypes of our experience. A world to be looked at. A world to be entertained by or alarmed and shocked by. But not a world to act in. The challenge of Jesus on this issue is clear. Act. Be salt. Be light. And I say that includes involvement in politics. We are all citizens of the greatest country on this planet. We have freedoms that other countries dream of having. Freedoms that others have died for us to be able to enjoy. Issues of enormous cultural significance are on the line in every election. The most elemental act, and in many ways, the most powerful act, is to vote. It's the one act of influence that people around the world would give anything to have. And it's ours to wield. And for a Christian, dare I say, it would be unconscionable not to vote. It would be abdicating our roles as salt and light in this world. So is it okay for a Christian to vote? Not only just okay, it's virtually commanded by our role as a citizen. But what do you do? What do you do when you feel that no matter how you vote, you're going to be making a choice between two bad choices? Between two policies, two laws, two candidates, two parties that both fail to fully honor your Christian values? Do you just refuse to vote because it forces you to vote for someone or something that you don't agree with? Or do you hold your nose and vote for the lesser of who you think to be two evils? And if you pick the lesser of two evils, which one is actually the lesser evil? So let me tell you how I vote. Well, before I get to that, let me tell you what we as a church, and what I as the leader of this church, can and cannot do in this regard. You see, since 1954, legislation has prohibited nonprofits like this church from either opposing or endorsing a candidate. Churches may not directly endorse or oppose a political candidate. And the key word there is directly. Not only that, but as a leader of this church, I cannot send out a letter on the official church letterhead endorsing or opposing a candidate. We can't display political signs on church property. The only way that we can participate, or that I can participate, is indirectly. But what that means is that I can personally endorse a candidate. I can tell you in the church parking lot or at the grocery store or somewhere else, I can tell you who I am voting for and why I am voting for that person, although I've already voted for them. I can use my personal Facebook page, Twitter account, Instagram account to say whatever I want. Now, I've strayed away from that. I've tried hard to stay out of that political fray. I just can't do it directly from here on this stage. As a leader of this church, I can personally work for a candidate. I can even contribute financially to a candidate. The church itself cannot. This church cannot contribute to a political candidate using church funds, even if you all agree with that candidate. I can also endorse a candidate, use my title in the church that I am affiliated with. Just can't do it on official church letterhead. I'm free to speak and teach on moral and social issues, which may be part of the political debate, even if by implication it throws support to one candidate or critiques another. As a church, we can take official positions on these issues. We just can't directly endorse or oppose the candidate. As a church, we can organize voter registration, as long as we don't favor one party over the other. We can hold public forums and invite politicians to it. If a candidate were to visit our church, they could be publicly recognized and even introduced. If we were really, really, really brave, we could even invite them up onto the stage and give them a microphone. I'm not that brave. We could do that as long as we didn't endorse them, or the bigger issue is as long as they don't ask for your support, which is why I probably would never give the microphone to a candidate on the stage. We can distribute nonpartisan voter guides. We could even offer our location at the voting station. So those are some of the things that legislation says we can and can't do. So with all that in mind, what can I tell you about how to vote? First and foremost, I can tell you that biblically, you should vote. You must vote. It's being salt and light, like we talked about. And for those of you who are using that argument that you can't choose between the lesser of two evils, Because you can't vote for someone who's not a Christian. If I may, can I tell you you're misguided? Because unless Jesus is on the ballot, you're voting for the lesser of two evils, no matter who you vote for. Because we're all flawed. That doesn't mean you overlook a person's character. It just means that all of those candidates, no matter who they are flawed. They're sinners, just like you and just like me. That doesn't abdicate your role to them. Second, I can tell you that when you do vote, it's not about whether the person you're voting for is a devoted Christ follower or not. What's critical is where they stand on issues of importance to Christ and to culture. You see, people sometimes forget we are not electing a pastor-in-chief. We're electing a commander-in-chief. And there isn't a single clear leader that the majority of Christians support. NBC News said that evangelicals lack a distinctive leader in this election. So what can I tell you specifically about who it's okay to vote for? You're probably thinking not a whole lot after I just went through everything I told you I can't do. But actually there's quite a bit I can tell you. Even if it won't be about a person's name, and it won't be about choosing which political party. But quite frankly, I don't care whether you consider yourself a Democrat or a Republican. If you are a follower of Christ, you are a Christian first, aligned with a political party second. And no matter what people tell you, there is no official Christian political party. I know that in recent years, the Republican Party has been closely aligned with evangelical Christians because of social issues like abortion and gay marriage. But those aren't the only social issues out there to be dealing with. Other issues like how we care for the poor may be more Christian to be a Democrat on issues like that. The point is that we are Christians first. We are salt and we are light to both parties. As Martin Luther King Jr. once said, we are not the master of the state or the servant of the state, but the conscience of the state. The point is to think and to vote Christianly. There are issues in this election that are deeply important to many of us. Whether it be the definition of marriage, when life begins, the care for the poor and the homeless, the treatment of the foreigner in our land. No matter what the issue is, you must begin to think Christianly about those issues and to vote Christianly on them. That's what it means to be salt and to be the light. But ironically, many of us don't do that, do we? You see, we tend to compartmentalize our thinking. A compartmentalized mind is one that separates life into distinct categories. I have my faith over here. I have my job over here. I have Facebook over here. The stock market, my family. They're all in different categories. All without any integration between them. Our thinking about one area never affects our thinking in another area. So one can be a Christian, but not reflect, let's say, about immigration and how that is affected by their life, by their faith. I bring the immigration reform up because there's a research study done by Lifeway looking at immigration reform. And they said that we as Christians, we know the issues, and the issues are clear. You have border security. You have whether or not there's a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants and what that path should be. How to handle unity among immigrant families. We know the issues. But then it said only 1 in 10 of those Christians surveyed said that the Bible shapes their views. Only 1 in 10 use the Bible to shape their views on immigration reform. They said the vast majority of them were influenced either by media or their friends. But only 1 in 10 on one of the biggest issues in our day, only 1 in 10 use the Bible. That may be one of the most spiritual issues there is out there right now. And people didn't look at the Bible because there's nothing in it. There's plenty about immigration reform in the Bible. The Bible calls us to some very specific ideas. Now, let me show you a couple. In Exodus, you must not mistreat or oppress foreigners in any way. Remember, you yourselves were once foreigners in the land of Egypt. And then 1 chapter later, you must not oppress foreigners. You know what it's like to be a foreigner. For you yourselves were once foreigners in the land of Egypt. This is all throughout the Bible. Mercy, compassion, empathy, and concern. Foreigners, aliens, often called strangers in the Bible. They were always to be treated deferentially because of the vulnerability they faced in the country they were in. Even in the New Testament, Jesus talks about this. I'm not going to put this up on the screen because it's a really long verse. But let me read it to you and listen closely. But when the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit upon his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered in his presence, and he will separate the people as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will place the sheep at his right hand, and the goats at his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, perhaps even an immigrant, and you invited me into your home, perhaps even your country. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you cared for me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then these righteous ones will reply, "Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink, or a stranger and show you hospitality, or naked and give you clothing? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will say, "I tell you the truth. When you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me." Then the king will turn to those on the left and say, "Away with you, you cursed ones, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his demons. For I was hungry, you didn't feed me. I was thirsty, and you didn't give me a drink. I was a stranger, and you didn't invite me into your home. I was naked, and you didn't give me clothing. I was sick and in prison, and you didn't visit me." Then they will reply, "Lord, when did we ever see you hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and not help you?" And he will answer, "I tell you the truth. When you refuse to help the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were refusing to help me." And they will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous will go into eternal life. No matter how much we may differ on hammering out the specifics of immigration reform, caring for the stranger, the alien, the foreigner, is a deeply biblical idea. Showing mercy, honoring families and children, treating them with the love of God, being empathetic. So while we can have differences of opinion on policy, the biblical values we're trying to protect as Christians are clear. But only 1 in 10 Christians have bothered to find out what Scripture even says on this topic. You see, it's all about our worldview. Your worldview is how you engage the vast range of human thought in creation from a Christian perspective. For example, you think of the question, where did we come from? Some people will answer, we came by chance. It's all a big chance. Some people would say that we don't even exist. But we know that we were spoken into existence by a loving Creator God. Because we were created, there is value in each and every person He created, whether a citizen of this country or not. Whether they're an atheist, whether they're a Muslim. There's value in everyone. There's meaning and purpose to every single life. Truth is given to us. It's not determined by us. And that blows apart a lot of the thinking on cultural issues, doesn't it? Martin Luther King Jr., his Christian faith and worldview was everything in challenging racial discrimination and segregation. That Christian faith and that Christian worldview is what allowed him to write these words from the Birmingham jail. There are 2 types of law, just and unjust. A just law is a man-made code that squares with the moral law or the law of God. An unjust law is a code that is out of harmony with the moral law. All segregation statutes are unjust. Dr. King laid claim to a law that was above man's law. And from it, he was salt and light in a day and a time that needed it desperately. Perhaps we need to be the salt and the light in this day and time, which might need it just as desperately. God's call in your life. Discover the truth. Just know that you don't create it. You have to study it and you have to discover it. And let it shape your worldview and how you vote. God's not a Democrat and He's not a Republican. There are stands that one or both parties may have on specific issues that are either Christian or non-Christian. Issues about the sanctity of human life, definition of marriage and family, social justice, the environment, even issues related to gender identity. And based on your reading of the Bible, you may find that one party gets one set of issues right, and the other party gets another set of issues right. And it's also good to remember that on many of these issues, thoughtful, thinking Christians disagree about where to land. However you vote, vote. It's not okay, it's not just okay to do it as a Christian. It's part of what it means to be a Christian. So when you do vote, vote Christianly. Meaning in light of a Christian worldview. Weighing the many issues and dynamics and cultural challenges and making the best pound-for-pound decision you can for who you think will most advance the salt and the light that we are trying to advance. And no matter who wins next Tuesday, stop saying that you're moving to Canada. And as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, stop blaming the president or past president or sitting president for all the issues that we have in this world. Stop blaming them. Stop saying you're moving away, and instead, pray for them. Let me read you something that was written for our current president, Obama, back in 2004. It was written on the eve of the election. The author was talking about his responsibility as a Christian. May not always have been to support the president's positions, but it was always to pray for his leadership. So the author wrote this: "Dear Mr. President, I do not yet know your name, but in a few days you will be elected to our nation's highest office and become the leader of the free world at the end of a long and engaging election season. I wanted you to know that I will be praying for you, not praying against you or about you, but for you. That is both my pledge and my obligation as a follower of Christ. I will be praying for you from my position as a father of 4 and future grandchildren, that you will have the foresight to think through what your decisions will mean for them as the next generation. I will be praying for you as a citizen of the United States, that you will seek wisdom from God and humbly submit yourself to his leadership as you lead our nation through economic turbulence, domestic divides, and cultural diversities. I will be praying for you as a member of the global population, that you will work with other well-intentioned leaders from around the world as we face environmental challenges, wars and rumors of wars, and humanitarian crises. And finally, I will be praying for you as a Christian, that you will encourage faith in God to flourish and never allow deeply held spiritual convictions to become a matter of ridicule, instead encouraging everyone to grant them a respectful hearing, even if they go against the political policy of your party. So while I do not know if you will be the candidate I voted for, I do know that no matter what your name, I will support you in one way without question. I will be praying for you. Come Tuesday, I hope that you will join me in continuing this letter as a prayer. I will fulfill my obligation as a Christ follower. I will vote my conscience. I've already voted my conscience as best as I know how. But then, no matter who wins, I will pray. That is my duty as a follower of Christ. And if you are a follower of Christ, it's your duty too. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, I know that this election season has been divisive. At times I've wanted to turn off the TV and not log on to Facebook. But Lord, help us to know that as Christ followers, we are called to be salt and light. We are called to influence everyone that we come into contact with. And help us on every issue to look and find the principles that you have in the Bible. To not listen to what other people say or what the media says, but to find out what you say about the issue, Lord. And no matter who wins, help us to pray for them. Help us to lift them up, that they may know you better. And that by doing so, when people see how we react and how we are respectful no matter who wins, when they see that, will they see you in our actions? Because oftentimes what we say, what we post, what we do, doesn't appear very Christian anymore. Help us to dedicate our lives to you. In your son's name.